Frank Capra is our focus tonight, and up next, another installment of the Why We Fight series. This is the Battle of Russia. This is the 5th of the 7 films?
That's right. And it was one of the most rousing to the GIs who saw the movies. You know, as each one of these movies was completed, they were screened for all new soldiers and all soldiers who hadn't yet been sent overseas. And the Battle of Russia was really, really stirring to young men, partly because it relied a lot on Russia's own footage of its, you know, push against the Germans, and Russian filmmakers were very, very strong, and so Capra was able to create a very moving, very powerful historical document in this 5th movie.
Using footage shot in combat by other countries was critical to this series. It really couldn't have happened without it.
Yeah, there was absolutely no money to make these movies, which is a kind of remarkable thing since the order to make them came straight from George Marshall. You know, there was an absolute mandate, including from Roosevelt, that movie making was going to be incredibly important in the war effort, but there was just not going to be any convincing an appropriations committee that money for the war should be directed toward filmmakers rather than munitions or anything else. So Capra really had to scrape together whatever in the way of existing footage he could find to make these movies.
Having a backer like George Marshall is critical, but there were many, weren't there, in the military who thought using these Hollywood guys was an insane waste of resources, time, and any money at all was a waste.
Right. There was great skepticism about the unseriousness of having filmmaking as a part of the war effort at all, let alone assigning such an important job not to the makers of newsreels and documentaries, but to Hollywood guys who specialized in fiction and fantasy. It felt counterintuitive to a lot of kind of army lifers that you'd go to somebody who made It Happened One Night and ask him to be in charge of telling the truth about the war.
Capra was famously, in his feature films and in the Why We Fight series, paranoid that the writers were sneaking in communist propaganda. And he went through a number of writers in the Why We Fight series. But he settled on one lead writer eventually, Eric Knight. What do we know about Eric Knight?
Eric Knight was a really interesting guy. He, as improbable as it sounds, was the author of Lassie Come Home.
Yeah.
He was a British-American living in the United States and already a grandfather at a very young age. And he was someone to whom Capra showed the original Why We Fight scripts. And Eric Knight wrote one of the great war filmmaking memos of all time, just going point by point, saying in a very emotional way, these are terrible. These are terrible because they're only good and they have to be great because what's at stake is just too important. And Capra, I don't think, was used to being spoken to that bluntly and loved it and pretty much instantly turned over the oversight of the writing of all of these movies to Eric Knight.
I don't like to end a story sadly, but this is World War II, and there were a lot of sad endings. What happened to Eric Knight?
Yeah, Eric Knight was one of the first casualties on the World War II filmmaking team. He died in a transport plane on the way to Casablanca. The plane was shot down, and it was a terrible, terrible loss, both for the Army filmmaking war effort and for Capra personally. He really, he felt it very, very keenly for the rest of the war.
Mark, thank you very much. From 1943, co-directed by Frank Capra and Anatole Litvak, here's the Battle of Russia.